Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. What the fuck? Yeah, what the fuck? Yeah, happenings here. Tired old man. Yeah, whatever. You know, it happens. Yeah, it happens more often now that I'm old that I feel old. And it sucks. You know, just, I can't believe that people actually get away with talking about golden years and, you know, how great it is when they get to retirement and all that shit. No, they're just sitting here hearing the clock ticking. You know, they talk about women and their biological clock. Yeah. I mean, you know, well, whatever. Obviously, it's just people living in a delusion. So, yeah, they pretend they're, you know, that the time bomb isn't, you know, right next to their head. You know, the odds are it's just coming for you. You know, the dice are more and more skulls and crossbones on the dice. You know, it's just nothing to look forward to but your horrible death, and it just sucks. And you know that, you know, even if you score some great victory, you're not going to be you're not going to be able to enjoy it very long before some blight, you know, some part of the fun, your diabetes or this or that or some other horse shit's going to show up and fuck the party. Anyway, it's just all the lies and the bullshit. So that's what the video is. You know. All right, so I made a video. Okay, it's basically about. It has something to do with civilization and the fact that, you know, in my youth, I had this idea that you couldn't really undo progress. I mean, you really had to just keep getting smarter and smarter human beings. And I still have that impression that you really can't suppress knowledge. But who knows? If people don't want it, then you don't need to suppress it. You know, there's just so many people just so caught up in being group thinking or you know, just being trivial, you know, in terms of how seriously they take their life. I mean, they're just so caught up in being psychologies that they can't even have something called a philosophy, because it's all just psychology. They're all just reactionary, impulsive, touchy-feely bullshit machines. You know, and they don't have any perspective on their function at all. They don't critique their own function. They don't do any of that thing called inspection, you know, reflection. And so they never really see a context of their existence. You know, they never see themselves on the map and try to figure out, you know, how to properly function, because it's all just watch the big game, eat your Doritos, go rah-rah, you know, get drunk, I don't know, get worse than drunk, fun. And so there's not much you can do if people choose to be, you know, revert back into something as dumb as a rat in a maze, and don't really take any time to reflect on just how functional that all is and how they could enhance their own well-being as well as the well-being of other people by thinking a little bit about what they're doing rather than just doing it, rather than just routinely, you know, wake up, you know, put your slippers on, do you know, this routine, living in the routine, and never step out of the comfort of your little stupid habits. Something like that. So anyway, so it's you know, it's a tricky subject, so trying to think about what the dystopian future, which one we're going to choose, and in a way, even the success of Ethylism it would be a dystopian future in the sense that there's nothing pleasant, about recognizing our inefficiency and our dysfunction and how much pain and suffering we have wasted. All the war dead and all the horrors and the miseries and all the sad lives and terrible sad stories of failure and undignified ends. How many people have been shoved into undignified ends? Peter Falk, Glenn Campbell pop into mind just because they both had the Alzheimer's, and it's a pretty horrible way to finish your existence in terms of just becoming a cartoon character. So little of you is left. Just horrible. So anyway, just as part of the story is how do you communicate with people who don't have any attention span, really don't want to hear it, don't give a damn, simply, rather not give a damn because it's easier not to give a damn. But as I was saying, okay, so ephilism, as much as I'm saying, oh yeah, it's a beautiful thing that we could finally end torment and torture and be free of it. And all we're sacrificing is a silly heroin addiction. We're sacrificing being addicted to little tiny moments of glory that fade, into the past, and are just untouchable. It's like even my best memories are, I could just barely rub it. Like I could barely get enough, just get a little texture out of it. It's like 500-year-old Braille or something. There's so little that you can actually interact with in terms of reliving it or getting some sort of true psychological getting much out of it. Okay. And it really sucks that I have a bunch of pleasant experiences and nice moments and meaningful, passionate things, and you just can't get anything out of them. Frankly, you can't squeeze any new juice out of those old tire fruit, and even that just sucks. Okay. It's one thing to have the rose in front of you, and then the memory. Oh yeah, well, okay, yes, it's kind of red and fluffy. Maybe it has a couple little water drops on it. Oh, pretty, but you just really can't. Just not the same thing. That's my experience anyway. Yeah, it's just And so I was thinking about that too. I was just thinking about all these people who live these heroic lives, and they are the best in the world at something, and they're king of the hill, and then they have to retire and be regular humans, and I just can't even imagine how, that's really falling off the cliff in the sense that you just sit there and say, shit, I really miss being in the game. I really miss, it's hard to not imagine how much you would miss that in a sense. Having those moments. And maybe for a while they can just live in the, memories of the victory. But I don't know. I mean, I'm finding it hard to do that. So I guess that's the. I'm just going by my own personal experience, in stating that yes, I could say that. I guess it depends on how distant it is, and so if it was yesterday, it's not so bad. But if it's 10 years ago, it's harder, and if it's 30 years ago, it's even harder to make anything out of it, to live for that, to have that as your crutch, to get you through your gruelish, miserable, uninteresting, dull, and shitty life that you now have. I can't say unwritten, you know, you can still find plenty of stuff to keep you a little bit in the game, but I just mean it is a huge change to go from, you know, the playing the big game to just playing little games again. Something like that anyway. So to me that's, you know, part of the dystopia. So just coincidentally, you know, for me having this conversation, I saw an icon for the movie No Country for Old Men, and you know that's very dystopic. You know, I mean, geez, you just bleak all over the place, right? Funny, you know, it does have, you know, the characters are so extreme. Well, the one character. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of illustrates that this all, you know, just nothing really works. I mean, as much as, you know, it's always messy. Life is messy, it's sloppy, and you're really lucky to squeak by if you've gotten, you know, if you're still clean. You know, if your clothes are still clean, you haven't got all kinds of blood splatter and bullshit on you. Yeah, you were just damn lucky. Because, yeah, it's very hard to live without stepping on shit you didn't mean to step on, and to fuck stuff up, and to, you know, make poor decisions, and, you know, everything is ruined, and, you know, it's just, you hold on to the stock too long, you do, you know, sell too quickly, it's all kinds of scenarios of ways to fail, and yeah, just fuck this. So anyway, you can't have that fuck this conversation with these people who just, you know, in a fanatic way are defenders of the machine, you know, you know, and there's just no way they can, not without having to go through the very process I just described of having to accept reality. So they are so dependent on the crutch of their religion and their delusions of accomplishment and delusions of some future, you know, that's going to be so much better and everything's going to be so special and fantastic. And it really isn't, because if the future has any intelligence at all, okay, if they're not dumb animals still, they're going to realize that nature's horribly cruel, and there's all kinds of harm taking place every day, and it's kind of gross and disgusting to be, you know, eating your cupcakes and drinking your wine, and saying how comfortable you are in the face of that. It's almost a mocking of the circumstance. Now, you could say that people have shown that they're capable of that. I mean, there's plenty of people probably having nice parties and, you know, having all kinds of fun when the war is going on. You know, when people are, you know, in all kinds of horrible places, having all kinds of horrible things happen to them for their sake, you know, to protect their democracy or whatever the fuck it's for. And, you know, it doesn't, you know, they'll put a little thing on their sleeve or something, and, you know, there, I've done my part. You know, where's the white women kind of, you know, bullshit. Just, you know, where's the candy and the treats I can chase? You know, not giving it any thought. So that was something about, at least the, you know, the Vietnam War. The only thing that was, you know, I'm not saying anything good about it. Just that the news was actually showed up for that war. I mean, you got to see it. And so it was always kind of put into your mind that, yeah, people are doing this shit. Yeah, you know, and they're all over there, you know, in this mess. And, you know, I have to say I was a kid, so, you know, still a bunch of self-interest motivating me, and so mostly I was afraid of my future, for my future, you know, and the whole idea of being drafted and I just knew that I wasn't going to be a warrior, especially that war, because I couldn't understand what the fuck it was about. Some French thing or something. The French got us in there somehow. So just fuck that. Yeah. So I've lived as a psychology. I mean, I spent some part of my life, I guess. It's hard to say because, I drew a lot of philosophical conclusions pretty early. But yeah, I mean, I meranded through life where most of my days were routine. You go to work, you do this, you do that. Trying to think you're going somewhere or getting somewhere that somehow, well, maybe 10 years from now, I will, instead of doing this, washing pots, I'll be somewhere better. And that's all you do is you say, okay, I'm investing in my future. I have to go through this procedure to get to the future. And that's another thing you could talk about is all the whole psychology of how you're introduced to the system, and what kind of, because, my first jobs were pretty lousy. They were, delivering newspapers in all weather, walking, as a kid every day, sucking up a hunk of, you have to waste this hour, doing this thing, in the middle of the little time off you have after school and all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of a drag. And then I got into restaurants, which was just horrible business. Low pay and just 8 hours of chaos. Very little time to just sit and think, or none of that. You don't get any off time. It's just people, food, people, food. And there's just it doesn't end. Nasty. And then I started getting other jobs, like working as I worked in a car dealership as a Class C mechanic. I wasn't, they didn't let me do, the fancy stuff. But they gave you a different feel, because even though it was, because you're at the bottom, you just don't really have any kind of easy work to do. You're doing the oil changes and, the brakes and, all the shitty kind of jobs. And it's constant. You have this pressure to get 30, 40 cars done a day. And, it's yeah, and you almost fall into that. You let you let that corporate mentality almost control your own psychology, and you keep thinking, what's my record? 39? Okay, I'm going to go to 40, 41, 42, and you start not even taking your lunch hour, What am I, an idiot? But yeah, I was an idiot. And then I got a job where I was working in a machine shop, and that was a whole new world, because it was, it's still a lot of work. You got to do all this wiring and this and this and this, but it's so much more interesting, and there's so much more to learn, and there's so much more to the whole subject of making a machine and all the engineering and all that kind of crap. And so it gave me a whole different perspective, and the work was more interesting, I guess, is and not as tedious. But again, it had all its frustrations. When I had to start milling aluminum, and it was just such a nasty metal to work with. So that was tedious and irritating. So there were things that were tedious and irritating. But anyway, so I'm just saying that so that's part of the psychology, is how you're introduced, and what you end up doing, and how much how much your work suits your personality or your disposition, and how much what you get stuck in, and and I've been so much better off if I had better planned my future, and became a golf pro or something. Yeah, much better life. Pool maintenance, that was a good one. Leighton, you know. Yeah, it's a good racket. So yeah, I just chose poorly as a kid. And anyway, so I don't, was this going? So I'm just using that as an example of just being, okay, it's a system, you got to play in the system. People get caught up in just living their life, and they really don't have time to do any of this reflecting on what their life means and what it means to be human and on Earth, and what it means to have billion years of evolution of the little machines and hundreds of millions of years of them saying ouch, you know, being eaten alive and all kinds of horrible shit. Oh, just unimaginably horrible shit. And just how, you know, and that's all you really, you know, I mean, I'm just saying, you either believe in reality in the sense that you take responsibility of the fact that that's what's going on planet Earth, is just a bunch of these psychologies, these things, these machines capable of having good and bad days, and there's just an awful lot of horror and torment and torture that you wouldn't, you know, you'd pay $1 billion to evade some of the diseases people get. You know, you would sell everything you own not to be killed that way. You know it. You know, if you could really buy your way out of it, you would try to. You'd mortgage whatever you had to mortgage. But you'll accept it if it's happening to somebody else. You know, if it's not you, it's okay. So, and that's a pretty easy piece of bullshit to catch. I mean, you don't need much of a glove to catch the bullshit of, well, it's okay as long as it's them. You know, as long as it's happening to them, it's okay. As long as it doesn't happen to me or my kids, then everything's just fine. I mean, that's just so fucking stupid and ignorant and retarded and dumb. You know, are people dumb enough to fall for that? So anyway, I haven't played any of the video. Yeah, okay. You know, so I don't know if the video is, you know, it's a little bit, there's always stuff in it, but I mean, you know, I just don't know if I got to the point I wanted to get to, and I don't know if I did here either. So anyway, I was bringing up George Orwell, and there's, you know, you could just talk about, so there was only the 2 big books, right? I don't know what else he wrote that was really good, so maybe I should look into it and see if I can find another book he wrote that's a good story. But they're very dystopic, okay? I mean, Animal Farm, I hated the ending. It was just, oh, this is so depressing. I love the idea of the story, you know, the whole animals revolting and the whole thing. Yeah, oh, great, 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 great. And it all turned to such horrible shit. And in 1984 had the same idea, you know, the person finds love and they find a real life outside of the bullshit, and they're tortured and it's back to bullshit. So nothing, you know, it's a failed revolution. So both stories are about failed revolutions. And the whole concept of revolution is, I guess, the argument, right? Is, you know, it's really not about whether you're a minority or a majority. It's about whether you're fighting for something right or you're fighting for something stupid and idiotic. And that's the real point that needs to be emphasized, is it doesn't matter whether you're majority or minority. It matters what are you doing it for, why, you know, can you defend it as being good and right, or are you only doing it because everybody else is doing it, or because it's to your personal advantage, and, you know, blah 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 blah. So anyway, so let's play some of it. About all the waste and horror you've witnessed. So, yeah, I guess people were of both perspectives, and there's one perspective that's good for the propaganda and the storytelling, and the other perspective is just, again, not as much fun. So I guess that's part of what I was saying is that there's no fun in being a hero of saving people from disasters that now won't happen. It doesn't look very heroic. It doesn't. You can't. It's not as visceral. Okay. As shooting the enemy kind of thing. So, it's just not the same kind of feel-good story. Being an eradicator of disease or something. I don't know what to analogize it to, but it's just not as good as hitting the big home run in the big game. Piggishness, this idea, this selfishness, and this self-interest. So yes, the corruption of self-interest, and that seems to be a theme in everything. And now, but in 1984, I really couldn't find it. Because it just really didn't make any sense. It was like the Big Brother was a cabal of people who weren't stupid, and you're just saying, what benefit is there in the nonsense? It wasn't like they were making some sort of beautiful life. They weren't making a nice matrix. It was kind of just a dull, ugly, stupid, moronic matrix. So why would they do it? I mean, especially if they were going to create people who had to live in it. It just didn't make any sense what the payoff was. Hard to see the payoff, the graft for them. Sure. Well, I can't say Animal Farm is so. Yeah, it's all trying to find some kind of logic or reasoning or principles to live by. And so that was the tragedy of Animal Farm. Is they wrote their new constitution. And and then edited it, to suit special interests. And, we're sort of stuck in that same boat now. That all these special interests are compromising anything that would be a principle. And, I think it's obvious. If I did a public poll and asked people, okay, should cops pay a higher price for violating the law? They would say, yeah. Should there be higher accountability for people who are carrying guns and can shoot you? Should they be placed on a higher level of accountability for their behavior? And, especially when you volunteer for the job, no one's forcing it on you, and you're paid an exorbitant salary. I think they would, of course, say yes. I think people would vote for this accountability thing, and I think they would vote for a politician who stood up and said, look, if you catch me doing anything shenanigan-y, like, funneling $1 million to my brother-in-law, then, yeah, I should go to jail for 10 years. Whatever the sentence is for it, give it 10 times worse, because, yeah, I'm a public servant, You've trusted me to protect your interests, not to protect my interests, not to facilitate my gain. I think they would vote for that, and it's just weird that nobody runs on that platform. No one ever says the words. And so it just sort of illustrates that there's so little incentive for an honest person to get into the morass of politics. But it's, it bothers me that there was one chance, right, in Nevada or some dopey state, they actually were going to make judges accountable. So they were actually going to, say judges can't be complete assholes. And people voted not to do that. And you're just saying, well, if there's no accountability, you're not going to get justice. It's not going to happen. It has to be reward and punishment's the only thing that works. There's no other method to make people good except punishing bad. There's just no other way to do it. Rewarding good works, but you still have to punish bad. You got no choice. This brick wall heading for idiocracy thing is that the game hasn't been elevated. It's, you know, yeah. So that was my stare. You know, it's like we got 2 plus 2. We start thinking, and you know, back in the 70s, there were smarter conversations about politics. You know, the debt and, you know, the future, and you know, Carl Sagan testified before Congress about how, you know, temperatures are going to get a little bit crazy. You know, people were thinking, and then they just stopped thinking, and now it's all just troll speak everywhere. No one says anything intelligent. Much better. I mean, the little Trumpies are just brilliant. You know, and, you know, they'll lead us to some beautiful future. I think that was more in the context of the religion and all the rest of the fake part of the whole agenda. It had to sell out to those special interests. You know, 10 Commandment kind of moronic boxes, and figure out that there's more to this story, you know, than some dopey god planting human beings. And so you're just saying the future can't possibly maintain that, right? I mean, you're just saying with all of this technology knowledge and all the physical knowledge and, you know, all the testing that's gone on and all the rest of it, and genetics and all this stuff. I mean, how can people still be living in this silly fucking bullshit fable? I mean, you're just saying, how could a kid raised with any kind of access to the internet, you know, remains dumb enough to believe in this fairy story? It just doesn't seem possible. But then you realize that most of the people having kids, they don't have an internet. You know, most of the kids are not born in the you know, their egg is, you know, outside of civilization. Humans are the threat. Yeah, and so then you have all the apocalypse kind, you know, after a nuclear war or something. So I was just talking about different dystopia stories and, you know, what the future will bring. And so, and then I brought up nanotechnology because that's the one that's just so, you know, you're not going to stop it. You know, there's no way to conceive of exactly how that one won't be, that once that whatever is out of the barn, it's smallpox for everybody. I mean, it's just, you know, you can't imagine how, you know, there's anybody left. I mean, it'll make killing people really easy and untraceable and all kinds of things like that. And so it's just, you know, it's going to be just too easy. Little exposure. And so the future has all kinds of, you know, all kinds of stuff in it that will eventually probably be used in all kinds of be able to malicious ways. So, you know, and I was pointing out how, you know, right now there's a ton of technology that could do an awful lot of damage to an awful lot of people really easy, without them even knowing they've been, you know, fucked. And you're just lucky that most of the terrorists are too stupid to take advantage of it. You know, I'd send them my list of people for the mob to take care of because they're just of no value to humanity. So I was just talking about the fact that, yes, you know, civilization, you have to have a civilization. So I was just talking, somebody had linked to a anarchy video or whatever from 10 years ago, and, you know, some guy did a response, and I didn't even watch the video because it's, you know, it's just such a stupid idea. You know, the whole Stephen Molyneux moron with the no government thing. It's just so goddamn idiotic. There's just no conceivable way that our worst nature won't be liberated in such an, you know, just, and just the, you know, you have a zero survival rate. I mean, there's just no way you're going to survive that liberating human desire, because people's desires are too motivating. Their resentments, their hatreds, all of that stuff, there's just no way you know, they're not going to act if there's no accountability for acting. No fingerprints, no court. Other than some stupid contest about who can build the best technology to kill a bunch of other human beings, the contest should be something of more merit than that. Something, I don't know exactly what the nature of our conflict and how it's resolved. So I brought up, like, when I was a kid, people would talk about having, instead of wars, that the two presidents would have to go into a boxing ring and fight or something, or some other way of resolving it, because it's just arbitrary. There was a Star Trek episode like that, and different ones. There was one with the suicide machine. So instead of people actually, the computer would have the war, and then the computer would tell you how many people had to die, and you would just gracefully walk into the suicide machine and get killed in some graceful way rather than some horrible way, and this way you didn't have to blow up all the buildings and make a huge mess. And the fact is, there's a certain logic to that. It's just undeniably better than the alternative, which is, your parents are dead and your house is gone. I don't know, 1,000 square miles? I don't even know if it was that big. Just too ridiculous. So I was talking about the whole, the Japanese war. We defended China and then put sanctions on Japan and just begged the Japanese to get into a war. It's just like, for what? For a stupid little tiny hunk of China that the Japanese said was important to them. And it's almost like, oh, come on, you're not going to do this. You're not going to get into a war over this. So you're just saying it's all so fucking stupid and broken. I mean, if you can't prevent, if you have to have wars over nothing, if you can't, it can't be over something more than that. Too stupid. It's like the breeders stealing the money of people who don't have kids, saying that we're going to tax everybody to educate our children. So then this was supposed to be the subject of, the fact that you can have systems that work better. So instant runoff voting, huge improvement. Getting rid of geographic voting districts, huge improvement to our democracy in terms of representing people instead of where people live. I never had a representative, okay? My whole life, every congressman I ever voted for never won. So my vote was always stolen by some asshole who was the antithesis of representing me. And there's no reason to have a democracy that works that way. There's every way you can have a completely positive democracy where only positive votes get somebody into office, and everybody gets a representative that's pretty close to defending their ideals. But you can't even have the conversation because people are so goddamn stupid and that they're not even literate enough to understand the mechanics of democracy and what breaks it, and why there's so much graft and why there's so much pork and why there's so much waste is because it's all a bunch of special interests that are controlling the two parties. And that's the real liability. That it isn't about voting for ideals and principles. It's about voting for special interests. And I guess the point So anyway, I was starting to think, okay, so if we had smart people running the world, but smart people are so unreliable now. Yeah, so that's part of the trick, is that you can be smart in some technical way. You can know all these kind of chess strategies or something, or you can know how to fold proteins, or you can know how to do all kinds of things, but you don't know anything else about anything else. So that's the liability of all this intensive information being available, is that it's there's no lesson plan. Okay, so there's no, you're not led to the important stuff to know, and the fact is, you need people who are specialists. You need people to be devoted to one subject. You need all that to advance those subjects. And you really shouldn't have this expectation that they have any knowledge of all this other stuff, because they've used all their time to acquire knowledge of this specialty. And so that sort of breaks the significance of intelligence, because the intelligence is got blinders, so it's laser intelligence. It's a whole bunch of watts in one direction, but there's no light anywhere else, that kind of thing. And so you have, what you could call smart people who are very dim, okay, in terms of their knowledge of what it is to be a human, or their knowledge of anything called ethics, or their knowledge of, democracy, living, because it is so fucking arbitrary and horrifically cruel. So there's no deserve has something to do with it. And like I said, you just think about all the people who really had what they got out of life for them personally was shit compared to what they gave, kind of thing. So when some issue comes up, the religious kooks won't be able to bias it because they own the Republican Party. And other loop-de-doo, anyway, so special interest, bad thing. Killed. And cigarette smokers, the only people killed by cigarette smoking. I went on a bit of a 15-year ago rag about the whole, just as an example of how democracy fails. Just because there were, a huge number, 40 million smokers, and they really could have defended their rights if they were at all organized. But the fact that they did live all over the place, and they didn't live in 3 states, or, they ended up with no defenders in government. And so the government could get away with exploiting them because they had no political power. And just as a demonstration, that's, democracy should work better than that. And the fact that the Constitution doesn't work either, in the sense that it's against the law, okay, it really is. It's against the Constitution for special interests, okay, for you to attack one vice and not attack all the other vices. So you can't tax one thing because it's a minority of people who do that, and then make your vice sacred. Your fatty food vice, or your alcohol vice, or some other vice, that's sacred, and this other vice is, this horrible blight for which we must, shoot the perpetrators. Anyway, it's clear that there was nothing principled in the attack on tobacco. If it was about the principles and saving children or any of that nonsense, then you'd have to apply the same sanctions against these other vices that are so destructive. And instead, the government sanctions lotteries, which, nobody decent could think lotteries are a good idea. I'm not. That's not who I am. It's so irrelevant to everything about me. So I was just saying, living in a state, this state, it means nothing, okay? It doesn't have a damn thing to do with a single perspective I have, and it's the last thing in the world I would want represented. I'd rather a congressman wear the same sneakers I'm wearing than live in the same state. And we'll just play, halfway houses and different mechanisms to allow you to live. So I was just talking about how we spend so much on all this special this and special ed and special, and it's all just a huge giant waste because people think they're going to get, there's something productive to get out of it, and there's nothing productive to get out of it. We don't, we already have too much dumb labor. and elevating a person who's deficient into some bare minimum functionality does not profit society when it costs $500,000 to do it, because he's not going to earn enough in his whole lifetime to ever even justify the expense that was spent, to do nothing, but pretend you're going to make the person into something they're not. I don't want to pick on things, but there's blind people that go golfing or something, and they have to have 4 people go with them, and you're just, who would do this? Well, what the fuck is that nonsense? It's just silly. Just a bunch of used car salesmen. People really are pretenders, not really thinkers. So pretender might not even be the right word, but yeah, they're just animals. They're getting dumber and more trapped in just blind, stupid ignorance and paying no attention to, what's obvious. You're a thinking, sentient machine on a planet covered with feeling machines, okay? The rest of the feeling machines aren't doing any elaborate thinking, but neither were you 250,000 years ago. So I don't think you would say a human from 250,000 years ago should be ground up for dinner. So why is it okay to do it to all these other animals? Why is it okay that they be left in squalor and horror? If you could see 250,000 years ago, a kid born was just as capable of going to school, learning, becoming a civilized human. If you could reach into the past and grab one and save them, you're saying you wouldn't do it? They're going to live their life expectancy was 25 years. Their life was going to be just a lot of brutality. You wouldn't rescue them? And so the real argument is you're just all bigots against dumb things that don't look human. I'll help prevent it in the future, and I'll try to do it, at least some of it, by example, and just, not eat. Okay, so I was just talking about how easy it is for people to make some gesture to the truth. Like, you don't have to live in it. You can live in your delusions, live with your crutches, live with your bullshit, and but acknowledge that that's what you're doing. You have a psychology. You can't warp it and bend it into, finding a way to live in this dark averse of the truth. But make your little statement that, okay, I get it. It exists, okay? And I can make little concessions. I can not eat meat on a Thursday or something, and I can do little things to acknowledge the fact that, I'm not for it, and I don't defend it, and it's bad. Instead of doubling down on trying to defend the evil. That's the dumb part. Well, it's not dumb, it's evil. Defending evil is evil, frankly. All right, that seems like a video to me, but I'll take a pause and see if there's anything it's always short. It's short of being enough. Good enough, enough in terms of, hitting all the points that need to be hit and all of that crap. Part of my frailty. Alright, so I don't think much else came to mind except, there's just nothing to like. There's just everything that looks like it might be a good thing turns into shit, and there's just very few. I can't find people to admire even. They're either hypocrites or duplicitous, or it's always some kind of, they're right about 500 things and then they're wrong about one thing that's really important to be right about, and just ruins the whole thing. So anyway, just blech. So yeah, so part of me having to make these videos is me making them in the context of I'm old, okay, I'm tired, and the world is as ugly as it's ever been. And yeah, it's just, yeah, it's hard to no, it's like I'm motivated, but there's just so little place to fight. There's no game, where you can know the rules. It's like it's like 400 different coding languages all mixed together or something, and there's just no way to code anything. There's no way to play with this mechanism without it not working on. Oh, it works in Internet Explorer, but it doesn't work in Netscape, and it doesn't, it's all this kind of horse shit. It's, these are just kind of in the current circumstances. There's very little resolution. It's not as easy as pouring water on the fire. A little more complicated. Anyway, so that's whatever. It's one of my excuses. That's what it is. But whatever. It's the condition. I'm human, and I have to, the wheels have to run in sequence with each other for me to be, more or less functional. Let's call it that. So I'm fighting through a bit of a dysfunctional period. Yeah, let's call it that. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, okay. I'll take some vitamins. See if maybe that'll make it all go away. All right, anyway, until the next time and such and so forth and whatnot.